Topic today is on bring your own device and the consumerization of IT. And we, I'm in IT, we talk about this stuff all the time, but not everybody is always familiar with what we're talking about in IT. We learned that. So the last few conferences that we've had, the forums that we've had, we've tried to put together a little bit of a introduction into the topic to try to bring everybody the same level of awareness, if you will, on what we're talking about. So we have some very fine presentations today that are going to get into the nuts and bolts of BYOD and consumerization of IT, and I am not. I'm just going to give you an overview, share a couple of definitions with you, get a sense for whether maybe you agree or disagree with what this says. So what does BYOD mean? A predominant definition of BYOD is using personally owned mobile devices in the workplace to access company resources as well as their personal resources. So we've got this blend. We've got this blend of information that's coming together that previously, I'm not going to say it didn't exist, because in reality it did, but it wasn't known to exist. It wasn't promoted to exist, I'll say. But I've seen surveys that have as much as 80 to 85% people now using their own personal devices within a company, within businesses. Now the businesses won't say that. Typically they're like 40, 50% that say people are using personal devices. But the employees, the people themselves, that number is much, much higher. And this includes application and data. So we're seeing terms not just bring your own device, but bring your own application, bring your own network, bring your own whatever label you want to put on that. But largely it centers around these electronic devices that people are finding value in bringing into the workplace. So what type of devices? Well, any type of electronic device that accesses or stores information. So we think about laptops a lot and mobile devices, and we think about tablets, but it also includes USB drives and other forms of media, electronic media, that they can take data and they can store it on their own personal devices. I mean, how many in here have a thumb drive, a USB drive? Okay, how many of you had that thumb drive supplied to you by your company? Okay, I see one hand, two hands. So by extension then, all of you that raise your hand that have a USB drive, if you're using it for work, you're already bringing your own device into the organization. And I would submit you're already taking company data, business data, out of the business environment as well. Application, what type of applications? Well, these are applications that many of us use all the time. We use every day anymore. Email, instant messaging, social media, whether it's Facebook or something similar, LinkedIn, YouTube, file storage, cameras. I've seen people in here this morning taking pictures with their electronic cameras. I was at a Gartner conference in June, and I was surprised at the number of people that I saw that were taking pictures of the slides that they were being presented, and presumably they're sending them to somebody. I don't know if they're using it as evidence that I attended. They give you a thumb drive that has all the presentations on it, but they're still taking pictures of it. Picture storage, GPS devices, maps, and of course, what started out what we're calling smartphones today are really nothing more than small platform computers that have been adapted to work as a phone. Why should we care? Well, there's a whole lot of reasons why we should care. Security being a preeminent one, especially when we're in an information assurance forum. How is the data being secured? You're moving back and forth. Are you using encryption or not using encryption? Is everything being stored in plain text? Do you have sensitive information on your devices? Do you have people's names and addresses and personally identifiable information? Regulatory compliance. Do you fall under Sarbanes-Oxley? Do you fall under the HIPAA Act or privacy regulations? Support has been a big concern with IT because now where we had what we thought was a fairly controlled environment, although Microsoft interferes with that sometimes with their annual software releases or updates, but now we have consumer devices that are coming at us that are different operating systems, different manufacturers, different platforms. Cost has been a key issue that's come up. Are we really saving money as an organization by people using their own devices, or is it costing us more? Productivity, that's still a big debate on whether it does in fact make people more productive. I'm not sure what the measuring stick is, but some will say, especially in certain industries, that bringing your own device aids productivity. Excuse me, complexity. We've been trying for a number of years to drive complexity out of our information systems, and now we have new devices coming into our networks every 6 months. And then recruiting and retention, I saw one comment that said, you know, I'm young, I'm innovative, I'm hip, and I want to work for a company that's also young and innovative and hip. And this is one of those metrics, if you will, one of those indicators on just how accommodating a company might be to some individuals. It is on the radar. This was a survey that was done for members of the Society of Information Management. There were IT executives, 195 IT executives that were surveyed. And on the left side is a ranking for this survey. On the right side is a prior year ranking on the survey. And you see number 7 is bring your own device wasn't even on the list last year. This kind of alludes to what I was talking about before. The question is, do you predict an increase in the percentage of employee-owned data, smartphones, tablets, assessing business resources? This implies a reduction of business supplied devices. Yes, 72% in 2013, 65% in 2011. And then you can see the no responses. So certainly, we have a movement towards bring your own device, whether it's being sanctioned by a company, whether they actually have policies that apply to it. It is in fact happening, and people are bringing their devices into the workplace. So the other term that we want to talk about is consumerization of IT, and there's a couple of different perspectives on this one. Probably the first one up there is probably the most predominant, and that's a growing tendency for new information technology to emerge first in the consumer market. So before, you know, when PCs were introduced, for example, laptops were introduced, they were predominantly introduced by the business organization, and people got them and used them, and when we got laptops, they took them home and they used them. Cell phones were the same way, largely supplied by organizations initially. People adopted them from the organization. Now we're seeing that flipped around completely. Now we're seeing these devices are coming into the consumer markets, who in turn are introducing them into the company. And I know you're going to hear some of that from at least a couple of our speakers today. The other part of consumerization of IT is this trend towards consumers being exposed more to an organization's internal applications. So these web-based interfaces largely that you're seeing today, these portals, is this look into company data, is that gap's closing. Where we had a much more tiered architecture, where you might have a web server that's taking data that's provided to it by a database, but not accessing that database, internal database necessarily directly. Now we're seeing the consumer interacting much more directly with the information, directly with the database that's sitting in the company's data center. And you're seeing this is having an impact in terms of time, because now you're getting a lot more real-time information For example, maybe you go out to, to Amazon and you buy something from Amazon, and you're more assured you're going to get what you're buying, because when it goes into your shopping cart, or when you say, I want to buy it, it's actually there, it's allocated, and you have it. Where in the past, there was a lot more lag time there in the architecture. The downside of that is it's bringing the bad guys much closer to that information as well. And there's less process steps for them to go through in order to access that internal information. So those are the two broad definitions of bring your own device and the consumerization of IT. And that was really what I wanted to try to educate a little bit on what we'd be talking about here today, and the definitions behind that. So are there any questions, any comments? Anybody? Nope. Yes, Lou. Oh, yes. and I know Chris Fleck is going to be giving a presentation on the situation in Cooper. She's living it every day, and I know she'll tell you very dynamically the impact that we're seeing. So I'll let her share that with you when she talks. Yes? We will be using a product at Cooper to manage our mobile devices, and Chris also will be talking about that. So, yes. Yes, Lynn?
Lauren, we're fortunate that we also have folks here visiting us from Lawrence Community College, but we also have a gentleman here from BGSU. I'd be curious to know how they're managing your asset. I know college campus, you're going to be doing it much sooner than most other organizations. How do you manage it?
Why we're here.
Let's hear it from an InfraGard perspective, Matt.
Okay, my name is Matt Hesjack. I'm Director of IT Security and Infrastructure at Bowling Green State University, and I'm also one of the board members for the Toledo InfraGard chapter. That's how I met Lauren several years ago. Those of you that are not familiar with InfraGard, it's a FBI private sector partnership for information sharing, geared mostly around all infrastructure protections, but it really started out from the IT perspective. So it allows us to, a lot of us to network with each other and share things in a confidential manner. So I have kind of represented InfraGard from that perspective, but then also at Bowling Green State University. And as it pertains to BYOD, in particular at higher ed, that's kind of happens because at BGSU we have 20,000 students, 7,000 of them live on campus, and they bring all sorts of devices, plug them into our network. Now, theoretically, they shouldn't be having access to university data. However, you bring in professors, adjunct professors, tenured track professors, even our administrators all expect to have their own personally owned devices and be able to connect and access the LMS system from home and do grades and remote in and that kind of thing. So we have general policies that protect us to a certain degree. However, the proliferation of the devices, has kind of gotten out ahead of us. So we've been doing a lot of research of what other universities are doing, and we have a draft policy that I'm getting ready to take forward to the President's Cabinet to kind of see where that can go and find out how many people freak out with the amount of ability we're expecting to be able to remote wipe devices and that kind of thing. And then we're also looking into different products that we can have installed on the devices that we are going to support, which is going to be geared around the basic iOS and Android-based devices from that side of things. But we're just not there yet, and we're working on it. And what I've been seeing from a lot of other universities our size, they're not there either. So we're kind of all in the same boat.
Thanks, Matt.
Okay, one of your slides, Lauren, you had a survey of IT professionals, I think in business and industry, and where BYOD falls in terms of significance. I think it was like number 7 or 8.
Yes, yeah.
Let's see, number 7. within higher education, EDUCAUSE is one of the leading, most significant organizations that tracks the connection between higher ed and technology. And I looked at what they had as the EDUCAUSE's top 10 issues for 2012. And number 2 on their list is supporting the trends towards IT consumerization and bring your own devices. So kind of reflects what was being said here and what Lynn was saying. Well, a lot of this hits higher ed before business and industry. And I think the year before this, it was at number 7 or 8 on our list. So I think we're just forecasting where this is going to be going for you next year. So.
Yeah. I had a classroom experience with BYOD, and I know I see some students in the class there that may have been impacted by that. But I have some lab exercises that I do, and one of them is going through some old by today's standards DOS instructions, because a lot of available security tools today are still either DOS-based or Unix-based, so I have a couple of exercises around that. And some of the students were using Apple computers, running Windows, and then they were running, DOS, the command prompt under Windows. And there was one command that was in that lab that did not exist on those computers. So it was a relatively minor thing. We had other computers that they could use, but still, this idea of having a lot of different types of things within the organization, how that's going to react with different applications, with different browsers, under different scenarios, is not always predictable. So I think we can expect to see some more challenges, some more issues from the user community, and how effective some of these tools are. But it is certainly something that we're going to have to deal with. Any other questions or comments?